Well, hello everyone and welcome to this event on clean heat for homes, organised by Fern and the Cool Heating Coalition and co-hosted by MEPs Sigrid Friis and Vila Niinistö. We apologise if we got your hopes up with the Tangled on the screen. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a film showing, but you're here to learn about clean heating. My name is Kira Taylor. I'm a climate and energy journalist here in Brussels. Today, I'll be moderating this discussion as we look at how to ensure a just transition to reduce the EU's reliance on wood burning. Heating and cooling is almost half of the energy we use here in Europe. Bioenergy, including wood burning, covers an estimated 20% of Europe's heating supply and accounts for about 80% of the renewable heat production. Burning wood for heating not only impacts forests, but also contributes to air pollution and oftentimes is inefficient. However, it's sometimes the only option that people have. Today, we'll be looking at the clean technologies that can replace wood burning, but also how to reduce overall demand and increase access, focusing on making this a just transition. We'll start by hearing more about this topic and its importance from our co-hosting MEPs and Fern. We'll then move on to a series of panel discussions to look further into this topic. Those will look at the technical options, reducing overall heating demand, and ensuring access to clean heat. As part of these, you'll have your chance to ask questions to the panellists. You can do that via Slido. You'll see a QR code come up on the screen next to me. Just scan that, and the questions will magically appear on the laptop in front of the moderator. Photography will be taking place throughout this event, so please let the organisers or photographer know if you don't want your image used. This event will also be recorded and put online at a later date. As I'm sure a lot of you have already found, there are refreshments in the corner. Please do feel free to go and grab them. The Wi-Fi code is also over there. And if you want to talk about this event, please use the hashtag #CleanHeatForHomes during and after the event to post on social media. There are also QR codes which you can find an information page with resources, infographics and reports from Fern and the Cool Heating Coalition. And for anyone who likes the traditional method, there are also paper copies outside. So to start our event, I'd like to introduce our co-hosting MEPs and get their remarks on this subject. We'll start with Sigrid Friis, a member of the Renew Europe group for Denmark in the European Parliament. She sits on the Industry and Energy Committee. So for your introductory words, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be co-hosting today's event with both Vila and with Fern for the Clean Heat for Homes. And I'm specifically excited to explore how we can reduce our reliance on wood burning while ensuring the just transition. Because I think sometimes we might need to be reminded that many communities are still forced to rely on wood for their everyday fuel, posing a challenge to both climate, environment, and the public health. And blaming individuals for depending on their only affordable heat source would both be unfair and counterproductive. So the goal should be to ensure that everyone can access both cleaner and safer heat, and that goes especially for the most vulnerable in Europe. Yet, we must confront what I would call the climate reality, which is that burning wood is far from carbon neutral, as the smokestack wood burning can emit more CO2 than some of the fossil fuels. So this is a challenge. The forests that we have in Europe are our major carbon sink, absorbing 7% of our annual emissions. So continuing to rely on wood as a fuel threatens our already dwindling carbon sinks. And although, as we all know, forests can regrow, it does take decades. And we simply don't have that time if we want to cut emissions by 90% in 2040. At the moment, more than 40% of EU's renewable energy still comes from wood burning. But if we included these emissions in the energy sector, total EU emissions would jump by more than 50%. And this reveals what I would call a serious gap in our policy framework. The EU Renewable Energy Directive is classifying the burning of forest biomass as zero emissions. And as a result, billions of euros in public funds are being spent on wood burning. But that's on the expense of the truly low-carbon options like solar, thermal, heat pumps, building renovations. I believe these subsidies incentivize more logging, further decreasing our carbon sinks. And while the latest revision of the directive introduced some measures to solve this, they still fall short of the needed ambition at this stage. Meanwhile, we cannot ignore the health concern of wood burning. Wood smoke is chemically similar to tobacco smoke and often just as harmful. It increases the risk of respiratory illnesses, so it's not just a question of the environment, it's also a public health issue, if you ask me. So, how do we take effective action on wood burning while still meeting our social obligations? Today's event will explore the answers, but I already know that we will need to improve access to clean heating solutions for all Europeans, including low-income households who are the least able to afford the upfront costs. The good news is that we already have the technology and the know-how, including heat pumps, energy efficiency measures, and building renovations. So let's use today's discussion to address the remaining obstacles so that climate protection, public health, and social fairness can move forward hand in hand. I personally look forward to hearing the insights from our panelists up here that you will meet in a short while, and I hope that this event will contribute to sparking some fresh ideas and some actionable solutions. Thank you very much to each and every one of you for being here today.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ville Niinistö, a member of the Greens in the European Parliament for Finland. He also sits on the Industry and Energy Committee. So to introduce us again, Ville.
Thank you, Kira, and thank you, Siegfried and Fern, for co-organizing this event with me. I think it's very timely when we are looking forward on EU policies on how we can make sure that people have access to clean energy and that energy is affordable. It's a big part of the discussion that how we can also replace wood as a source of heat in housing. Wood burning obviously is an issue that touches deep emotions, social justice, resilience, climate policy and public health. It is essential that we approach this discussion with access to cleaner, safer and more sustainable alternatives for everyone. Obviously, fire has been central to human survival for millennia. We must never frame the conversation of bioenergy as blaming people for being poor. Rather, our goal must be to ensure that everyone has access to cleaner heating options. Wood burning is deeply tied to resilience. Wood is widely available, easy to burn, and in extreme situations it can be life-saving. However, in most parts of Europe, we do have other energy sources available, and the scale of using wood is unsustainable at the same time. The challenge is ensuring that these alternatives are both affordable and accessible, so that people are not forced to rely to burn wood as their only option. So I think it's also important that we address the issue that people feel that are we now taking away their saunas or ovens? No, we are actually giving them an alternative that is more sustainable as the actual heating source of their houses, because from many perspectives, from climate, from environment, from public health, from small particulate matters, it's very important to get rid of wood as the main source of heating in housing. Actually, in Finland, when it comes to emissions in residential areas, burning wood is the main cause of environmental air pollution in Finnish regional or residential districts. So actually majority of the small particulate emissions come from burning wood, and that is not necessary. That is not even economically viable. So we have to make sure that people understand that these alternatives have to be the main sources of heating in housing, and then they can do their recreational uses on top of that, while not jeopardizing health and climate in that equation. And now we are moving to the climate impact. If you look at the scale of how much bioenergy is being used out of the total amount of EU renewable energy, it's 40%. And billions of euros also go into subsidies to continue to flow into this practice. This scale is unsustainable when it comes to the CO2 emissions created by burning of wood, but it's also unsustainable when it comes to biodiversity protection of our forests. So that scale of using wood for energy does create a lot of biodiversity impacts on forests and the growth of forests. And obviously, burning wood releases more CO2 per unit of energy than fossil fuels in most cases. So even in the best case scenario, when forests regrow to offset emissions, it takes decades to even centuries to balance that carbon debt. and we simply don't have that time. So as we should approach wood as being a resource that is valuable, and if we do cut down trees, which we will continue to do in a country like Finland, it needs to be bringing the maximum added value to our societies. And burning wood is the lowest value that you can produce out of wood, and a complete waste of resources. So from that viewpoint, we should make sure that wood is being used as a valuable resource while respecting biodiversity and while doing climate action to make sure that is also part of circular economy, that carbon is also stored in those products that we then produce with that added value. From all of these perspectives, it's clear that we need to reduce the use of wood for burning, but I would also like to still raise the health impacts more clearly. Wood smoke is highly toxic, comparable to tobacco smoke in its chemical composition, and it increases the risk of asthma attacks, heart disease, strokes, cancers, and premature death, and especially children are vulnerable to this. So I would, if you would ask individuals who are burning their houses with wood, that do you want to risk your children of getting these levels of exposures that you have currently in these residential areas? Most people would say that, yeah, we have to look at alternatives. But if you ask people, do you want to replace your oven with another source, then it's more of a practical question of how to make sure that can be financed. And that is part of the discussion we are having today. So, making clean heating technologies affordable through targeted financial support, grants and incentives should be a big part of our approach. Phasing out subsidies for wood burning while reinvesting in renewable low-emission alternatives, strengthening air quality regulations to protect public health, and making sure that if wood is being burned, that it's being burned with best possible techniques. That's also important. And supporting rural and lower-income communities so that everyone has access to cleaner energy options, not just those who can afford it. So the conversation around wood burning is not just about climate or policy, it's about fairness, health, and ensuring the transition to cleaner energy leaves no one behind, that even people with less financing means available can access cleaner energy sources. If we focus on solutions that prioritize access and equity, we can move beyond outdated, harmful energy sources while improving lives across Europe. So I'm looking forward to today's debate from this background. Thank you.
Thank you both, and a really good introduction to our conversation, that this is a very holistic conversation, not just about climate and environment, but also about health, the practicalities, the social aspects, and the sensitivities that come up in this conversation. Finally, to introduce the topic to us today, we have Martin Pligion. He's a forest and climate campaigner at Fern and will further dive into this topic for us.
Thank you, Kira. Thank you very much. Dear guests, in the name of the organizers, I'm very happy to welcome you to this event. I would like to introduce our discussions with a very warm thank you to our two hosts, Sigrid Friis and Ville Niinistö, for having us. And I would like to introduce as well with a short personal note, because as we've heard, wood burning is very emotional, it's very sensitive, and let's not shy away from it. About 5 years ago, in the course of a research on the bioeconomy, I discovered that the EU's renewable energy policy incentivized member states to subsidize energy companies for burning wood in power plants in the middle of a climate crisis. I couldn't believe it at first. I had been working for almost 15 years already on EU policies, documenting how corporate lobbying sometimes managed to crush the public interest on issues like water management, agriculture, chemicals, pesticides assessment. So believe me, I knew one thing or two about how absurd EU policy can get sometimes, but this honesty was beating it all. So 4 years ago, when Fern opened the bioenergy campaigner position, I applied immediately. It hasn't been smooth sailing, I must say. I've witnessed firsthand, and I'm not the only one in the room, how years of hard work by citizens and democratic debates among MEPs from across Europe could be destroyed in the secrecy of a trilogue night, and how the good position of the European Parliament on the Renewable Energy Directive revision was made minced meat of by the then Swedish presidency of the Council. Despite modest improvements, EU bioenergy legislation today still rewards practices that damage forest and worsen the climate crisis in the name of climate action, which is quite a feat. We must get rid of fossil fuels ASAP, but replacing them with wood burning at that scale has done more harm than good. You've heard about the emissions damages, but you have to see that today the EU land sink, mainly forest, has lost nearly a third in the last decade due to a combination of overlogging and the climate crisis hitting forest already. Indeed, at this acute stage of the climate crisis, we no longer have the time to wait for trees to grow back. It's a strange world we're living in. Certain tree species are suffering from the changing climate conditions, but natural forests, irreplaceable ecosystems, are much more robust and are better climate, biodiversity, and water allies than tree plantations. We're not even sure that the trees we cut today will fully grow back, actually. I used to really love the sweet smell of wood burning. And I still do, actually. But I have much more mixed feelings about it now, possibly because of my job. Because today I know that this sweet smell means that I'm smelling benzene compounds, and these are super toxic. But I also have family relatives living in the French countryside who heat their homes with wood because they need to save money on energy bills. I'm not blaming them. Is it me being more sensitive to the issue because of my job, or is it a trend? I've been smelling more wood burning in the streets of Brussels lately, at least since the energy crisis struck. Member states are not only rewarding energy companies, they're also incentivizing the purchasing of wood stoves and boilers by households. And some European cities like London or Utrecht in the Netherlands have gone the opposite way and banned wood burning altogether, entirely, on air pollution grounds. Yet, as we've heard, for some of Europe's poor, wood burning is a hard, dangerous, but unavoidable work because freezing kills you faster than lung cancer. Policy is important and can make mistakes. People need to heat their homes. Failing to include equity and fairness in environmental policies is a mistake that deepens inequalities, leading to these policies being rejected. How can the EU reduce its over-reliance on wood burning in a way that is fair? Again, people must heat their homes. Answers to this question are likely to be different in cities and in the countryside, in windswept plains and mountain valleys, in affluent and less affluent countries and regions, at the individual or the collective scales. Some answers will rely on new or better technologies, others on reducing the need for heat itself. In all cases, public policy can make a big difference, and we will inhale the result, whether we like the smell of it or not. So for public budgets, for other wood-using industries whose supplying is being cut away by the biomass subsidies, for our health, for the climate, for forests, in some for our future, I really hope today's discussions will help us identify what the EU can do to help all those who need it access cleaner heating options. Over to you, Kira. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to pick up on that message of people must heat their homes, that this conversation is not whether or not, it's how. And to go into that conversation, that will be what our first panel discussion is about. So if I can ask our keynote speakers to take their seats, and if I can ask our panelists for the first panel to come up onto the stage. So our first panel will be looking at the technological solutions to replace wood burning. So what's available at the moment and what that needs to become not only on the market, but also accessible for people to have. So to have that conversation, we have Melanie Auvray, Head of Supply Chains and Competitiveness at the European Heat Pump Association, and Stefan Verheyen, Project Officer for Climate Neutral Buildings at the think tank Agora Energy Vendor. Thank you both for joining us. So I'd like to start with a quick overview of what technological solutions are actually available. Stefan, I know you have a presentation on this, but I'm going to start with Melanie and then we can come to you on that. So Melanie, what technologies are we seeing available for people and how can they help replace this?
Thank you for the floor and the possibility to explain here today the heat pump technology. So as you name, I'm representing the European Heat Pump Association. And so, of course, we have several clean technologies, but I do represent the heat pump technologies. We also are part of another alliances that we have colleagues here in the room today, that is the Clean Eating, the Clean Eat Europe, coalition, that you can also Google and see the other partners. But talking only now about the heat pump technology, as I am representing them. So we have diverse of technology that are called heat pump technologies, and that can meet all needs in per se. If I list them quickly, so you have heat pumps for residential, for commercial, for industry. You have heat pumps that can cover the needs for new buildings, for renovations, buildings. You have heat pumps that have a low temperature, medium temperature, high temperature, and then you have also hybrid heat pumps that can also have a side of the electric heat pump and then a backup that is a gas backup. So with all these technologies, you have a set of technologies that can quite largely cover your needs. And from what we see in our sector is that these heat pumps can cover it all. And they are clean, they are renewable. As said previously, they are CO2-free heating and cooling for the heating, cooling, and hot water provision. They can help the reduction of the green gas emission. And if we have a bit of numbers so that it talks to you, for instance, in 2023, all heat pump installed already avoid about 7.5 million car on the road, for instance, in terms of removing the gas emission. And if we meet the target for 2030, that would means to avoid a reduction of, to have a potential reduction of CO2 emission of 5,000 tons of emissions. So that's huge representation also in terms of health, as we were saying before.
Excellent, thank you. I think it's a good reminder that heat pumps aren't just one type of technology, that they are lots of different technologies and have lots of different applications, and that's useful to think about in this. Stefan, I'd like to come to you about this. What technological solutions are available, and could you talk us through the research that you've done on this?
Yes, first of all, thanks again for having me. You should see a slide right now. Yes. This is a forecast, or actually a scenario, how Europe can reach climate neutral heating. It's a forecast done by us, but there are similar scenarios by the European Commission. And as you can see, today, Europe is heavily relying on fossil fuel heating and on biomass heating. And when you look to a climate neutral world, and the question will be which technologies will be powering European heating, you can see, as Melanie already said, that heat pumps will be the key. You can see it here for the 2050, oh no, please go back, thanks. For the 2050 column, you can see that the share of ambient heat, so the heat from the outside world, which is covering heat pumps, is expected to increase by far, and also the share of electricity, which is also powering heat pumps, is expected to increase and make up a large share of European heating. Another renewable solution will be district heating, also mainly powered by heat pumps, by large-scale heat pumps. And these two technologies will make up a large share of climate-neutral heating in Europe.
Thank you. And this report was published in February, and you can find it on the Agora Energiewende website. It said that with current policies, Europe may end up installing over 50 million new fossil fuel boilers by 2040. What was the core issue that you found and the reason for that?
Yeah. When we go to the next slide, you can kind of see where the European heating market is standing right now and where the problem is lying right now. So right now, the market for heating appliances in Europe is still dominated by new fossil fuel boilers. So people are still installing a lot of new fossil fuel boilers into their homes, which are then staying 15 to 20 years. And this is an issue throughout Europe. As you can see, there's also a significant share of biomass boilers in some member states. And when you now look to market forecasts and the question how this will evolve over the next years, you can see on the next slide that we are not really predicting this to change drastically in the coming years, and that, in fact, for example, fossil fuel boilers are still making up the majority of the heating market in the beginning of the 2030s. So we have a massive lock-in of fossil fuels, and the same goes for biomass, into homes, which are, of course, threatening our climate and biodiversity targets. And this is something you can directly link to the policy framework. So you can see that on the European level, we have not a lot of policy instrument addressing renewable heating so far. We will have possibly the ETS2 from 2027, so a carbon pricing system, which will provide a push for clean heating. And then we have national measures, we have national subsidy schemes. But if you account for all these supports and kind of do a forecast on assuming these policies, you end up with such a forecast. So right now, we do not have a sufficient policy signal to boost clean heating.
Thank you, Melanie. I'd like to come to you and see what your experience of this is, both in terms of, is the policy enough to support heat pumps, and are you seeing these practical challenges for heat pumps?
So as we've seen in the past years, it's been 2 years in a row that we have a large decrease of the sales of heat pumps, and it's quite known on the market. The last year was a decrease of 47%, and there are many reasons being the inflation rate, of course, that touch everybody, not only heat pumps, but also the instability of subsidies, the instability of the political support also, that it's quite impactful. And finally, and most of all, one point that we really highlight is the price, the energy prices, the electricity prices. We had a large increase of our sales in 2022, with the decrease of the gas price, and that called the installers and the consumers to move away from gas and to go toward more renewable technologies, but also that are more affordable, and that's left the situation went away, and we had again now the gas prices that are lower, and that is not good signals for the consumers to move away from the fossil fuels. So one of our big requests is that we work on the electricity price ratio, the electricity versus gas price ratio, and that's having the electricity price at least not more than twice the price of the gas would give a right signal to the consumer, and would give also the possibility of the consumer to move toward clean heating, because often it's also not only but at the signals but the affordability, as we were saying before. Our heat pumps are 3 to 5 times more efficient. So if you have a price of the electricity that is more than 2 times, let's say 3 times, or up to 5 times in some countries more expensive than the gas, then the model, the business model is not there anymore. It's too expensive. But with our heat pumps being really efficient, even if the electricity prices are 2 times more expensive than the gas, which is already a lot, that would work. We just need that from the member state to work on, to also provide the affordability side. So this is the running cost, and as we were saying also before, the upfront cost with the subsidies program, and that having really stable subsidies programs for also for the lower incomes household is really needed, so that they have the possibility also to buy these heat pumps. But of course, you have also other business models that can help that, such as loans or pay-as-you-go or leasing programs. We see a lot of different business models that can help them also with the upcoming costs.
Thank you. I think that affordability and business model aspect is really important to this conversation. I think in a minute we'll be able to have questions from our audience, so that you should be able to see a Q&R code on the screen in a moment. There you go. Would someone be able to connect the laptop to the Wi-Fi so that I can read the questions? So if you start inserting your questions via that, I'll come to those in a few minutes. But first of all, I'd like to ask both of our panelists, have you seen good examples of projects or policy where funding has gone well? Stefan, I know that in your report you talk about the clean heat market mechanism in the UK. How would that roll over into the EU?
Yes, so we observed a very interesting policy development in the UK, surprisingly, across the channel, outside of the European Union now, where they introduced a so-called clean heat market mechanism. And the logic of this instrument is similar to the one of CO2 standards for cars. So you kind of put a target on heating manufacturers that they need to reach for bringing clean technologies into the market. And therefore, they have an incentive to make heat pumps more accessible and more affordable. And this policy really gives them a clear trajectory to transition their business model from fossil fuel boilers to clean heating appliances, and we think that this is exactly what Europe needs right now, complementing other policies to bring clean heating forward.
How would you see that implemented in the EU? Would that be something that's done at the EU level? Is it something that member states need to do?
We think that it would make more sense to implement something like this on the European level, because it's a European industry, and it's also about the competitiveness of the European heating industry, and therefore you need a strong European signal to ensure that the future competitiveness of the European heating industry is still there.
Excellent, and I now do have access to the questions, so feel free to send them in. Melanie, I'd like to come to you as well on this. What examples of projects or policy have you seen go really well in this transition?
I wouldn't go in that direction, but rather what we need more. Of course, we have seen things going well, such as one-stop shops in general at national level, that are things that are really working and helping the consumer to get the right information and to get the right process into place so that they have their heat pump installed. So it works from the installer's perspective up to the subsidies also support to get. So these are well-functioning support for the consumer. But if we go to the policy side, I would rather say that what we need more is predictability of the regulatory side. And what I mean by that is having a long-term planning, long-term perspective at EU, but also at national level, having targets for the clean heat products, appliances, that is important for the transition, having an effective single market, having our product requirement harmonization and having them put into place and implemented. Also having the EPBD and the EED and R&D, sorry for everybody, the Fit for 55 directive implemented at national level and making sure that the member states transpose it. That is exactly what we need in the stability that the markets need right now.
Thank you. And, well, speaking of Fit for 55 jargon, one of our questions is talking about ETS2, so the carbon market for heating and road transport. And the question is asking, what impact do you think ETS2 will have on clean heating pathways? So would either of you like to take that?
I'm happy to take it first. Yes, it will of course have an impact because in many member states so far you don't have any carbon price on heating fuels. So heating fuels are often very cheap compared to electricity. So the ETS2 will help to rebalance the electricity to gas price ratio that Melanie just mentioned and therefore make clean heating more attractive. Yes, I think that's the general effect.
Do you like also to say something?
Not specifically.
So there's also a question on what is the role of a fossil fuel phase out in the trajectory towards net zero by 2050. So I guess specifically, how would this help this heating? If fossil gas were phased out, would that create a bigger incentive or a bigger market for heat pumps?
I guess we were talking about mandatory phase out. Yeah. Well, we have tried that in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, with the dates, and that went completely wrong in terms of political support. We tried a phase out via the eco-design regulation, and well, it was not something that the member states representative supported, nor the members of the parliaments. It was really highly debated, and not only in Europe, but also in Germany. We have seen the German debate. So we see that there is a need to stay away from the wording phase out or banning. And in a sense, is not exactly what we need. What we need in our industry is, as I was saying before, predictability, stability, but also to deal with the energy prices. If we deal with the affordability aspects of the clean heating technologies in heating and cooling, that would also solve itself and help the consumer to move away from the fossil fuel appliances, because they know about the impact, they know about the instability, also the political instability, having to rely on fossil fuel base from Russia or from other countries. We know that is not a long-term possibility. So,
Stefan, I'd like to bring you in there. Are there lessons to be learned from Germany's experience here, and are there things that countries could do better?
I think that is also what we thought about a lot when writing our report and thinking about this new potential EU policy. You kind of need a more gradual shift in the market. And I think the problem we saw when you want to ban something is that people are afraid and also rushing to buy new gas boilers, what you could see in Germany last year, for example. And alternatively, we think it's more wise to have kind of this gradual phase down of fossil fuel boilers and a gradual phase in of clean heating solution. And we think that the clean heat market mechanism is something which would really play a big role here.
And if I may add, I would say that rather to have targets for the clean heating technology. So, for instance, EU and national, most likely also national targets for heat pumps, for instance.
Thank you. We're coming to the end of the first panel, so I'd like to ask both of you to give your closing statements. So we are beginning to see the EU talking about this. We're going to see a big package of measures next week, so with the Clean Industrial Deal and the Affordable Energy Action Plan, which I think may have changed its name since I last saw it. So what are your calls for European action, and are they specifically for that, or are they for something else? So what's your main call for the European Union to boost this technology? Stefan?
Yes, I think what so far is missing in the political debate about heating is that this is also an issue about the competitiveness of industry. We always talk about it now in the context of the automotive industry, where we see that China has advanced with EVs, while the European automotive industry was very comfortable selling their combustion cars. And we're a bit afraid that the similar thing could happen for the heating industry. So if you don't give a clear signal, the European manufacturers are very happy to stay on selling fossil fuel boilers. In 10 years, they are all going to be a bit afraid of Chinese or Asian heat pumps coming in because they're more competitive. And I think that's a dimension which so far is missing from a discussion where heating is always seen as something from a climate perspective, and people are afraid of bans and afraid of banning certain technologies, but also you need to be aware that there's this competitive dimension, and it's the question of whether the European heating industry will still be competitive in 10 or 20 years.
Thank you. And Melanie, your final word here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stefan. Actually, it's a really good point that we haven't tackled in this session. So the competitiveness aspect, our industry is really European industry. It brings jobs and economy here in Europe, and we need to keep it, to conserve it, to protect it. And this is also something that we are working and advocating right now at the European Heat Pump Association to show what we can do and how we can help our industry, our heating industry to continue to be competitive, but how we can also help the other industry to become more competitive, to decarbonize, as we have also industrial heat pumps that can help to decarbonize the industry. So this is one of my aspect, and maybe if I may, one final also aspect that we haven't tackled in this discussion is the installers. We absolutely need also to support the installers, and this is really national activity. The installers need to be retrained, re-supported, and redirect toward clean heat. And for that, the member states should put into place curriculums, classes, and structures to train these installers, but also to support them financially in their retraining, because we need to incentivize them to move away from the fossil fuel boilers installations.
Thank you both. Those are really key messages. A round of applause for our first panel. So useful there to look at what the industry needs, at the affordability aspect, the competitiveness that this could bring. We are now moving on to our second panel, which will discuss how to reduce the demand for heat using energy efficiency, improvements for Europe's buildings, and more. And crucially, again, that aspect of how to make those measures more accessible. So to lead that panel, I'd like to hand over to Marco Grippa. Marco is Programme Manager at the Environmental Coalition on Standards NGO, or ECOS for short, and part of the steering committee for the Cool Heating Coalition. So Marco, you have the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Kira, for the introduction. I'm Marco Grippa. I'm over the moon, actually, to introduce this panel. I would like to thank the member of the European Parliament for this opportunity to host one of the very first event on sufficiency for heating demand. Together with me, I would like to call it on the floor the two panelists, Eva Brandinelli and Geoffrey van Mosek. Thank you. Voilà. So I'm introducing the panelists. So Eva Brandinelli works as Building Policy Coordinator at the Climate Action Network Europe. She coordinates the work of the network as regards the decarbonisation of the building stock in the European Union. Her advocacy goal aims to make EU building policies fit to achieve the Paris Agreement target of 1.5 Celsius degrees while being socially just and inclusive. Thanks, Eva, for being here. And Geoffrey van Mosek holds the title of Architectural Engineering and Doctor of Applied Science at Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. After an early career combining applied research and practice in an engineering office focusing on thermal design, is today a lecturer and researcher in the Faculty of Architecture, Architectural Engineering and Town Planning at the same university in Leuven. His field of research extends from the energy performance of building to HVAC, heating, ventilation and air conditioning system, and in the recent year he has focused his work on the application of sufficiency and low-tech principle to building design and operation. Thank you for being here. I would like to start with a statement that we are in February 2025 and January last month was the hottest month recorded in history globally. And in Brussels, unfortunately, the Green Deal is in serious danger. So the United Nations actually stated in January that climate inaction will cost 100 times more than climate action. So we call it European and national policymakers to deliver the European Green Deal on the ground to unlock the benefit to consumers, but also to avoid the worst consequences of the climate change. For what they concern buildings, one of the initiatives back a few weeks ago was the revision of the product policies for biomass heater, namely eco-design and energy labeling, for solid fuel boilers and solid fuel local space heaters. I would like to emphasize, as been already said, that biomass is worsening indoor air quality, indoor and outdoor. The European Environmental Agency estimated that 95% of the EU urban population is exposed to unsafe fine particle. I'm talking about PM 2.5. And this is causing over 250,000 premature deaths annually in the Union. So we are talking of a health emergency crisis. So thanks to this revision, we can drastically reduce the emission thanks to product policy. They will benefit, as we said already, the vulnerable households, and of course save a lot of government expenditure from health-related costs. We really hope that the political divide that we heard in the European Parliament will overcome, because health is the major concern here. So next to policy, going through the panel, we are talking behavioral change. So behavioral change is a big portion of phasing down gas consumption and unlock savings. The International Energy Agency estimated to have around 5 billion cubic meter of saving thanks to behavioral change from citizens indoor. This is roughly as big as the Ireland fossil gas consumption last year. So a major action can be played here along energy efficiency. So I would like to start with Deva first. Reducing the heat demand is indeed crucial. However, energy efficiency, energy savings are overlooked at the start of these mandates. What do you think that the European Union should do?
Okay, thanks a lot, Marco. Thanks for having me today, and hi, everyone. Very important questions indeed. So I think if we look very closely at the status of our building stock, we are really called into, speed up, so accelerating the renovation wave. We know that, yes, I prepared a couple of slides, but it's really on the background. So we already know that when it comes to the snapshot of our heating in homes, what we're dealing with. So high consumption, buildings account for 40% of our total energy demand, 36% of the greenhouse gas emission. And of course, these old emissions are actually very linked into space heating, which is actually the lion's share of this consumption. And in this, we see gas, wood and oil as the three main energy sources. When we look at the actually energy efficiency status, so the energy performance of our building status, of course, the setting does not get any rosier because we look at you can go on, please. We look at basically at a very old and inefficient building stock. 75% of our buildings are deemed inefficient currently. In comparison to the current national standards. And we know that, so even if the energy performance certificates in general really vary across member states, so we will never have, a perfect, let's say, comparison across member states, we know, though, that the larger, majority of our buildings stay in D or above, so it's a very, the three lowest classes, which means that the energy performance levels of buildings indeed play a very crucial role when we talk about ambitious, pathways towards decarbonization of the sector. If we go on, I think as part of the solutions, as part of our work at Climate Action Network Europe, we have our own Paris Agreement on compatible scenario, which is basically we calculate a pathway towards the decarbonization of all sectors, including buildings, which to be 1.5 compatible, we actually need to get to climate neutrality to 2040 instead of 2050, so really accelerate high-scale decarbonization process of all sectors. And so when it comes to this, let's say, acceleration, so 2040 as a date, for 2030, we're actually talking about a reduction of 65% of greenhouse gas emissions, which translates into a 50% final gross consumption, so the share of renewable energy sources by 2030 by 50%, and then energy savings target actually goes to 20%, which is, of course, for us is very important to really couple together renewable energy penetration and energy efficiency, because the two together need to always be coupled. We cannot talk about renewable energy and then energy efficiency in another dimension. And so with this setting, we need to look at what does it mean really for buildings. So at European level, we have a Fit for 55 package. We have a lot of directives that have been adopted with the highs and lows, especially for people working on energy efficiency or energy performance of buildings directive. Although we do have these instruments at hand, and I think the European Union really need to support member states now to really design national policies that can really, triple up the current renovation rates. Because as we know, renovation rates are very, very low. We're talking about 1 normal renovation rates per annum and then 0.2 when it comes to deep renovation. So like 60% and energy savings above, according to the legal text of the PBD. So yes, we need the regulatory tools. And of course, although very, very important, we need the enabling framework. So financing and technical assistance that are there. Financing, of course, is very important, but it's not only a matter of increasing financing, it's also a matter of channeling financing where is most needed and actually for the people most in need. And of course, technical assistance when it comes to the absorption. So not only helping people, especially helping people designing their own projects, renovation projects, but also helping to know how much the energy performance of buildings affect their lives, and actually can be able to do that systemic change when it comes to behavioral consumption, behavioral change when it comes to the consumption. Last point is just to see buildings in the next future. Of course, it's not only about the policies now, but also see in the future how we can make sure that buildings become an infrastructure of the energy system, so really using energy savings, efficiency and behavioral change to really help buildings to be integrated in the energy system and actually help the balancing needs of the grid. Voilà.
Thank you for the extensive answer on the EU context. With Geoffrey, we are going to discover a project that was developed here in Brussels. So Geoffrey, you were leading the Slow Heat project. So Slow Heat project analyzed 23 households in Brussels for 3 years with a motto, heating people and not the bricks. Starting with 19 degrees thermostat, participants themselves reduced their indoor temperature close to 15 degrees without compromising the thermal comfort and reducing their heat consumption by 50%. So this is really outstanding. Can you tell us a bit more about the project and how the inhabitant experience was during the implementation?
Thank you. It was fun. Don't be afraid. It was really fun, and it's still fun because it's an ongoing story. It was not just a few weeks of experiments. It was a 3-year project, now 2 years ago already, and it's still going on. And it's fun because it's empowering. And to make the point, just a small exercise. It's 22 degrees in this room. And I guess most of you are feeling comfortable or slightly comfortable. Let's imagine that few of you, just want to be more heavily clothed and start demonstrating for reducing the temperature and saving energy. It would cause social, maybe not unrest, but tensions beyond the group, inside the group. So there's something about social dimension in that. But even if all the group wanted to reduce the temperature, who knows how to do it? Who knows who to call? And even the guys in the management team, do they know how to do it? For technical management, whatever low problems that might occur. So it's about control of the building. And often it seems that we are stuck inside some kind of socio-technical and sustainable equilibrium. And what slowly demonstrated, in fact, is that we can get out of this equilibrium and we can redefine what's comfort, what's well-being, because it was a project about well-being at home. It was not about facing cold. It was about well-being. And as for every life-changing, lifestyle change you can bring, it needs a trigger. And in this case, it was the idea, let's heat the body rather than the house, and which means, for example, using heating clothes, heating furniture, or whatever. Let's bring heat where and when we need it on a very accurate way. And that's just a starting idea. And you can go on the other side. First one is self-speaking. I think you've seen the point. Second one is the idea that we need heat in the building for having a healthy building, for humidity management, for some basic well-being and health concern, of course. And we also need thermal delight and feeling warm sometimes because we're tired, because it's the end of the day, it's the end of the month, or whatever. We need more heat sometimes. We do not have to rely on the same system for that. We can have specific systems for specific needs. And that's the whole idea, and that's all. And so we tried. And it worked, as you said, 50% saving on gas, no increase in electricity bills, because you might expect, saving gas, increasing electricity, no more electricity, so we're quite proud.
Thanks a lot. This is very fantastic project. I think we can note down that for the building manager of the European Parliament to decrease to 19 at least. So we said that indeed the promotion of conscious behavior are very important, and of course better support for the energy upgrade are also key. So for you, Eva, what do you think the European Union can do to unlock the benefit of the multiple benefit for the occupant tenants' well-being, the energy system, and above all, the environment?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Marco. So I think I can actually go back to the points of my previous answer. So really, like looking into what are the enablers, let's say, factors that could really empower, everyone, to hop on the renovation wave, and in general, like being part, like an active part of the transition. Because as you said, Geoffroy, we need actually triggers. So we need people to also understand how their homes are actually affecting their lives, their productivity, their comfort, but also beyond that, also how that affects the energy system and the environment, so on and so forth. So again, we have a EU level, let's say, directives, a Fit for 55 package and all. And in the next months, we're going to work more on the multi-annual financial framework. We're going to work more on financing. We're going to work more on technical assistance, and actually all the initiatives that can really help, to make sure that this transition is viable and indeed inclusive for everyone. So I would say that within the context of buildings, really ensuring that the local authorities, so the national and subnational levels are really active part of this transition is very important. I would say crucial. So enabling, the local authorities to run information campaigns, raising awareness campaign, establishing one-stop shops. They are sustainable, so they are longer term, so they can really help everyone, especially the most vulnerable. So really, I would like here to highlight the importance of these, let's say, entities to be very much proactive in finding also those, multi-apartment buildings where many energy poor live. So really clustering, trying to let's say unite together different segments, but with a very important view to the most vulnerable ones. So voilà. So just few words just to recap. So really work better and more on making inclusive this financial aid and the absorption measures such as technical assistance and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Eva. It's also very important indeed implementation, as we said, of the Green Deal, what it concerns the built environment on the EPBD, for instance. So this is a lot to be done for the next years and within this mandate. Now moving back to Geoffrey, what do you think the policymaker can do to include sufficiency measure, like in your project, to legislation at European or national level?
Well, by definition, sufficiency is a choice. So it cannot be decreed by politics. It's not up to them to decide what we do at home. Well, that's my opinion, at least. But it's a choice. Anyway, it's a choice that to be made has some underlying principles. First one being you have to be in control of your own indoor environment. You have to be able to make choices. And there are various dimensions behind that. Of course, there's economic dimensions. If you're not able to eat at home, you cannot talk to people about sufficiency. So that's first point, and introducing the next panel also. So you have to be able to heat at home. You have to be technological solution that allows you to control your heating demand. And that's not the case in many, many, many buildings in Europe. People have just not devices to control the way they heat or to control it properly. It's about skills. What's the point of having a thermostatic connected IoT thing, whatever, if you do not know how to use it or how to use it properly? So it's about skills. So you have social programs, educational programs that could be added to the more technological aspects that we can include in EPBD or relevant directives, existing directives. And there's the narrative. You cannot ask people to reduce temperature at home if it's 22 degrees here. Let's lead by example. And that's a key point. We did not develop the Slow Heat project for low-income families. It was rather more educated, rich, not so rich, but educated middle-class people, because those are the people who define the norm. And we have to start, I think, with those people when it's about changing the way of life, not with the more fragile one. So technological skills, narrative, and then building management. We have to stop focusing on the infrastructure and more about how do we use buildings and develop directives or parts of directives that focus more on actual energy and not theoretical EPCs, or actual energy and management of buildings.
Thank you, Geoffrey. To complement your intervention, indeed, in my data that we estimated the 5 billion cubic meter of savings was to decrease the indoor temperature 19 degrees, which is your starting point eventually. So there's a lot to be done in that.
It's 10% by degree, roughly.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. I would like, so there are already questions, feel free to add questions in the Q&A. Before moving there, I would like to ask you the $1 million question. What would be your first action if you were declared Commissioner for Energy and Housing today or tomorrow?
Wow. So many things. We often say that buildings, they need accelerated action, right? But somehow it ends up that poor buildings are always, pick up at the second time around, the second round. I would look into really initiatives, for example, that have been already communicated upon, for example, the European Affordable Housing Initiative, but also like the electrification plan when we look into heating and cooling strategy. I think those initiatives need to be accelerated, and never forget, of course, the importance of delivering on the package that we have. I'm being a bit repetitive, but I think it's very important to highlight this, especially within the political climate that we are navigating at the moment. And yeah, so really, and of course, like helping this with the new, the revision, the upcoming revision of the multi-annual financial framework, I think is a very important venue where we can really steer investments, but of course, like funds, where can really help, optimize the existing building stock. I particularly highlight the existing because it's very important that we keep at the, highlighting the importance of really optimizing what we have already standing and just not always, just like build more, because of course, increased floor space area, of course, will never get you really closer to net zero if you don't kind of decrease on that side as well. So voila, I hope I answered your question.
Same question.
Yeah.
I guess I would call my wife first. Second, confirm the objectives of the Energy Efficiency Directive, EPBD Directive, all those policies that are under risk right now should be confirmed, maybe accelerated, but let's see the implementation, so we'll debate on that. But maybe two adaptations to those texts. It's all about energy. I think we should more focus about health in building, because when people stopped reducing temperature in the project, it was not because they were feeling cold. It was because they appeared to see mold, humidity, the laundry was not drying anymore or whatever. It was not about cold. It was about the healthy building and the healthy environment we're living in it. So we should focus, I think, much more those directives on this topic, and it would help improve the acceptance of those policies among the population also. So that's one point. And the second one is to urge member states to kind of allow for out-of-the-box proposals. Deep retrofitting, deep renovation of building, it's very good, it's necessary, but as you stated, for the forest, it takes decades. So we need to find other ways to act in complementarity with the retrofitting. So it is one example of one approach. There are other ones, of course, also, but let's give room to out-of-the-box proposal based on actual energy savings.
Thanks a lot, very insightful. So I think it's a good transition to the question, because there's one specifically on this point for Geoffrey. It's a bit technical. What's the minimum temperature to avoid mold humidity issue in houses? If you can reply.
It's not about temperature, it's about humidity, and it's 70%. Roughly. We can discuss, it's a function of temperature, but roughly 70%. So you can have a mold-free house at 10, 20, 18 degrees, whatever. It's just about humidity control, so it's about ventilation rate, which is why we have to talk about healthy building. It's ventilation, it's not heating.
Thank you. I have another question for Eva. What are your recommendations to helping households face the upfront cost of installing insulation?
Very good questions. Also, like very in line with what with what I've been saying about financing, increasing financing and absorption. I think it's so when we talk about especially vulnerable households and the need for more financing and better earmarked financing. I think here, especially for a person like me that works more like on EU funds, like where they go and how they've been using. I think it's important to really use like this public funding to really create and design like pre-financing mechanisms that can, for example, help vulnerable households to really increase their accessibility to also private financial instruments that many times it's very difficult for them to really go to a bank and just like ask for a loan. So, and also like when we talk about grants, like 100% grants, we really need to earmark those to really the ones that are in a needy situation. Like it's not for upper middle class or anything like that. It's more for indeed people that are already affected by energy poverty, or they're having a hard time to really bear the housing costs every month. So I think, yeah, indeed, designing a pre-financing mechanism, utilizing public funds, to design this mechanism and really ensure that the earmarking is very well made for the ones most in need. I think there are the three main things to do in that case. But although, of course, like each renovation project is per se like. It's very difficult to give an answer for everyone, but voila, these are the main three ingredients.
Thanks, Eva, for the answer. I saw a question from the audience as well. Please.
Yes, thank you, Marco. Well, I'm working for DG Environment for Clean Air Unit and for the urban policy. But from a wider perspective, I'm very grateful for your comments that for indoor health, for example, that's very much related also to the issue of wood burning, because if you have leakages from wood stoves, it's not very healthy indoor. An issue that perhaps is not very much on the radar screen. I mean, you mentioned climate, you mentioned biodiversity, you mentioned the health of forests and the supply side and air quality and PM and the benzene-related substances. All great, and I fully understand this, so no problem there. But please be also, especially in the context of the MFF that was mentioned, so I would like to link the health issue with one of your panelists and the MFF issue with the other. Don't forget about the circular economy aspect and especially waste. We have done a study on waste burning for domestic heating. And if you look at, for example, open stoves, you see that waste burning is extremely toxic. There was already talk about burning wood that is toxic and similar to cigarette smokes, etc. But there are substances that if you burn them in boilers or stoves that are essentially made for wood burning, but if you throw in plastics or textiles or shoes or other waste, papers, newspapers, you can have toxic elements that have a toxicity that is up to over 4,000 times as much as a similar amount of wood. So if you complain about wood, imagine if you have 4,000 times as much pollution indoor and outdoor as well, compared to the wood. 4,000 times, that is huge. And people, I understand this is a social issue, but you need a more holistic view. It is about air quality in the national air pollution control programs, the zero pollution ambition. It is working together with the national energy and climate plans, but also look at waste. If you collect the waste and if you process it in the proper way, and if you make them aware, because I think that a lot of people think that it is cozy to be in benzene poisoned air, but it is not cozy. You can see the flames, but it is really, really very toxic. And there is a lot of education that needs. We have done some projects there as well. The time is far too short to engage in a very deep discussion here, but I just wanted to mention this dimension. So it is far wider than this. And then why do people burn waste? Because they can't afford even dry wood. And then we have also done projects, for example, they go into the woods and they collect wood. It is not always legal, but if you collect wood and it is not dried in a proper way, you also have far more pollution. So other simple, even if you do wood burning, you can already reduce the pollution. And you have to make them aware that there are also things that you should never do, basically. So the waste issue related to the other one. We did, and that is perhaps interesting for the MEPs in this room, we did a project that was funded by the European Parliament as a pilot project about 7-8 years ago in Hungary and Romania. And then you see that legal measures don't suffice. In the countryside, you can ban agricultural waste burning and you can ban burning for domestic heating. But if you are poor and it is -10 outside, you would still burn it. So you need an alternative. But we did a lot, so there is a lot of information there, and I'm happy to engage with the MEPs or the assistants to see an overview of all the live projects that we did on the funding. I'm also happy to engage with Eva, with a beautiful Italian name, I guess.
Very long and difficult.
So I'm happy to engage because the MFF is also for us very important to mainstream air quality. Because but you have to work to holistic climate and social issues and environmental issues and health issues, and then in the end. It is always about the discussion, the societal costs are there. So you have private savings a bit, but the societal costs are far more. We have done an analysis. €1 on air quality delivers up to 8, 10 or 15 euros on societal savings. And that is something to take into account as well. I stop there because I don't want to monopolize this, but this is an issue that I would really like to add to the discussion, because so far I didn't hear very much. And the health and the MFF discussion provide a perfect angle for this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Indeed, I think it's very clear now that we are not talking about climate or one specific angle, but this is entailing and encompassing many sectors of our society and economy in general. I'll close up with the last question. They like technicalities from you, Geoffrey. So the question is on the wood as the fuel of the poor who lives in houses with deficiency that can barely be heated to comfortable temperature. How can heating be more just distributed?
That's the whole point of the next panel. I don't know what insight I could provide. I'm not sure wood is for poor people, as this person said right before. In our project, people always refer to Middle Ages, and you're going back to Middle Ages when they were eating wood. People were not eating wood in the Middle Ages. It's expensive wood. It's expensive. You have to chop it, you have to keep it, you have to dry it, and so on. So, we have a lot of misconception about behaviors of people, who does what, why, and I think we have more need for social sciences on those topics rather than always going back to engineers. I'm an engineer. They do not have the solution. They have devices, but to what problem? So that's why I can say the rest is more social science and economical science.
I mean, I don't have the right direct answer, but I just want to build on this point, on the social science. I think it's very important to really invest also on the type of profiles that we have in working in all the type of entities that can help, roll out the renovation wave. Like we can talk about like people working in banks, like knowing, the basis of energy, or like energy affairs, or people in one-stop shop actually being more proactive and actually go for those like vulnerable communities. I think they will need someone that knows how to deal with like social affairs and really understanding to whom they're talking to. So I think that's a very beautiful point that I think it needed some highlighting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eva, for your contribution. I'm closing up this panel, so let's thank you again, the panelists. A big round of applause. And give the floor to Kira again. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really interesting panel. So a couple of things that I picked out from that was this challenge that we have in the European Union of inefficient building stock and the need to boost renovation, but also the frameworks and the funding that's needed for that, and making finance accessible so that everyone is able to renovate and avoid some of those health issues which we heard talked about. But also we need to think about how we use those buildings. Do we need to heat to 22 degrees, but do we even have control to decide whether we do that or not, and really reassess how we're using our buildings? Well, thank you so much for that panel. If you have any comments or you want to put anything on social media, I will remind you that there is a hashtag for today's event, #CleanHeat4Homes, and feel free to talk about that for our third panel, which we're going to discuss how to how to make this more accessible and how to create access to clean heat. So to lead that conversation, I'd like to invite Claire Taylor, Strategic Communications Lead at the Cool Heating Coalition, to take the floor. So Claire, the discussion is yours.
Thank you, Kira. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I'm happy to observe that we are running wildly over time, but I'm going to blame the ECR that had the room before us. And I don't know if we've got anyone coming in at 2:30 or anything. We don't. Fantastic. Let's just roll with it. So my name is Claire. I know quite a few of you here. I'm lucky enough to work for the Cool Heating Coalition. And Fern is a beloved member of the coalition, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to co-organise the event today. Special thanks to Martin, to Anna, and of course to the MEPs Villa Ninestu and Sigrid Fries for enabling us to be here today. So, well, it feels a little lonely, I have to say, so I'm going to invite some coalition members to come up and join me here. Anna Bayumi, Fianza, please come up. Richard Lowes and Adam. Okay, you're not in the coalition yet, but we consider WWF aligned, so please come up and join me here. And so our mission, in a nutshell, the coalition's mission: decarbonised, renewable, affordable heating and cooling by 2040. So plenty of work ahead of us, that's for sure. Our coalition members are exclusively NGOs and think tanks. And I think because we have no industry partners, we're really focused on the social benefits of the clean heat transition and what this can bring. So the public good, the common good, the multiple benefits, and, as we've just touched on, people's health and well-being. A very important point that was made earlier by Stefan, I think supporting EU industries, manufacturing, tackling air pollution. So there's a lot of reasons. And we are really lucky to have the diversity of expertise in our membership. Clean heating and cooling is a big mission, complete with spacesuits that Jeff Roy showed in his presentation. It's a broad church, let's say. And some of that breadth of vision and experience is evident with this panel here today. So we're focusing in on affordability, and this is obviously a make or break kind of thing, because it seems that too often what's green and what's clean and good for you is also really expensive. And it's just kind of obvious that we're not going to be able to clean up heating and cooling unless the majority of households can literally buy into it. So we'll be talking especially today about low-income households, and this is a group that has been completely underserved by the public grants and subsidies and home energy upgrades financing to date. So for reasons of time, we'll just go speaker to speaker, and then we'll open the questions, open to questions from the floor, probably the old-fashioned way. So if you could get ready to speak into your microphone rather than go on Slido, that would be great. So Anna Bayumi, Energy Poverty Policy Officer with the European Federation of National Organisations Working with the Homeless, otherwise known as FIANSA. Tell us about your work with vulnerable households who depend on firewood and other solid fuels for heat.
Thank you. So when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I spent a lot of time in the very beautiful Cserehat area of Hungary, volunteering with Roma communities, and I made a lot of friends there. And I experienced the beauty of sitting next to a warm stove, but then I slowly also realized that kids there are getting sick during the winter really often. And when I go home, my clothes are smelling like humidity and smoke, which I never experienced before growing up in a city. And slowly I also understood that wood burning is a very labor-intensive work. Like father of my best friend from that region has always woke up in the middle of the night to put some wood on the stove as well. And then lately when I was writing my PhD, I also analyzed interviews with firewood users, and I also realized how difficult it is to manage heating with firewood, adding to that all the affordability aspects of increasing firewood prices. So that's why I started to analyze to what extent the EU Green Deal is delivering on leaving no one behind in the green transition. And unfortunately, we are not really doing well on that. And adding some data to the picture, I think it's important to highlight that firewood has really different usages across Europe, but in Central and Eastern Europe, it's mostly burned among low-income households. In Hungary, 30% of the entire population is relying on firewood, entirely or partly. From that, 15% is a mixed use with gas, which is also a question in the upcoming ETS too, because we already witnessed that when firewood prices are going up, gas prices going up, firewood use is also going up. And across the Central Eastern European region, in majority of the countries, people at risk of poverty are predominantly burning wood to get heat in their homes, with 80% in Latvia and Lithuania, and over 60% in Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, and around 50% in Hungary. And also these households struggle to just keep their homes warm, not because of their fuel, but also because of the state of their homes. 15% of the EU housing stock is considered as unfit, with leaking roofs, cracks, and windows where the wind blows in, the heat goes out. And these homes are really far from being heat pump ready, unfortunately. And also the households that are living there are not in the financial situation. Imagine that in the lowest fifth, like the lowest income quintile of Hungary, 25% of the population, a yearly income of one person is 2,500 euros, which is an average salary in Belgium. So in order to access the cheapest heat pump in the market, you need to work like 12 times more than an average Belgian person if you are part of the poorest income quintile in Hungary. And also, as we already discussed, the funding sources are really not distributed equally. In Germany, there was a generous federal state support for energy retrofitting, with 40% of that public money arriving to households with more than 5,000 euros income, and only 2% of it arriving to people with less than 2,000 euros So I think the situation is quite difficult, but there are some things that we can do to get on forward.
So how do you think it's going to change, Anna? Where do you see the biggest drivers for change?
I think first we should really change the way that we finance renovations from public money. We need to make the MFF right in order to really let EU money arrive to the poorest households in the poorest regions. Then we should really get on board the community aspect of heating planning, making sure that heat planning is also arriving to villages and towns, not only to cities, according to the Energy Efficiency Directive, and also providing solutions that are taking off the burden of individual heat transition among people living in poverty, because living in poverty is a difficult issue and you don't really want to struggle with additional problems. So really community-based heat planning and provision of district heating and other solutions that are making heat accessible and cleaner. And also we shouldn't forget that renovating the least performing homes and fixing housing inadequacies, according to a Eurofund study, if we do that job, it will need a lot of investment, but it will turn back in just 1.5 years. And I would come back to the point on air quality, that this is mostly on health savings. And I cannot imagine other better investment that gives the benefits more in a quicker way. So really we should turn around the way we finance renovations and should start to fix the most urgent housing needs, and that will bring us to clean heating solutions as well, because we will prepare the homes for accommodating the new technologies. So
okay,
I think this is the key points that I want to say.
Thanks a lot. And I think we're starting to really build the case for massive public investment in clean heating, but in cleaner air and reducing the burden of healthcare and indeed mortality. We have a video. Would you like to introduce the video? Is the system working sufficiently for the video to play?
Yes, so
we'll find out.
In this video, we're going to hear from Aranka Rostes, who is a community leader in a segregated Roma community in the south of Hungary. And she started the project of installing small solar panels on roofs, because their roofs, unfortunately, are not strong enough to carry traditional big ones. But these really small solar panels are providing light and some little electricity for households that were disconnected in long term or were in constant debt with electricity. So she will explain to us their everyday reality on heating and also bringing some alternatives to get to a better situation.
Okay. The system is working.
Fényhozók Alapítványnak vagyok az egyik kuratóriumi tagja, és a fő fókusza az alapítványunknak az energiaszegénység. Ilyenkor a fatüzelés az téli időszakban a szegény emberek számára nagyon nagy nehézséget jelent, és mivel sokuknak elavult kályháik vannak, vagy nem megfelelő fűtési eszközeik vannak, ezekkel csak nagyon minimális meleget, hőt tudnak előállítani, miközben nagyon sok tűzifát használnak el. És ezen felül még az is probléma számukra, hogy a tűzifának a beszerzése nehézséget jelent, és nem csak anyagilag, hanem még itt van egy másik probléma, ami a logisztikát jelenti. Ez is nagy akadályt jelent. Ráadásul a villamosenergia felhasználása is egy olyan alternatív megoldás lehetne ezeknek az embereknek, ami megkönnyíteni az életüket, viszont nagyon sok családnak, nagyon sok háztartásnak elérhetetlen, hiszen az elektromos fűtés szinte úgymond már luxus, mert nagyon sok ember nem tudja fizetni az áramdíját, és sok olyan háztartás is van, amelyik nem rendelkezik energiaszolgáltatással, ki vannak kapcsolva. És Úgy kell elképzelni ezeket a házakat, hogy ezek nincsenek szigetelve, a nyílászárok pedig egyáltalán nincsenek jó állapotban, hanem nagyon is rossz állapotban vannak. Emiatt a meleg hő kiszökik az otthonaiktól. És mondhatni azt is ilyenkor, hogy azok a családok is a hideg házban vannak, akik valamilyen módon tudnak fűteni. Ezek a lakások gyakran képesek 15 fok köré lecsökkenni, vagy akár még 15 fok alá is, és ugye ilyenkor jön még egy probléma, ami az egészségi állapotnak a romlásához tud vezetni. És a Fényhozók Alapítvány pedig az innovatív energiaforrásokat tartja szem előtt, például a napenergiát és a termálvíz alkalmazását javasolja, viszont ezek a megoldások érdekében a szegény embereknek is hozzá kellene férnie, a szegény közösségeknek is hozzá kellene férnie, elérhetővé kellene váljanak ezek az alternatív megoldások, viszont ezek a családok sajnos ezt nem tudják megtenni, és ráadásul a korszerűsítést segítő pályázatok nem megfelelően vannak kiírva. Ezeket a pályázatokat a szegény háztartások egyáltalán nem tudják igénybe venni. És elsősorban úgy kellene ezt az egészet megoldani, alternatívákat keresni ezekre, hogy a pályázatok azok célzottan legyenek kiírva a szegény emberek számára, és ezáltal ugye segíteni a korszerűsítést a házaikon, hiszen ez lenne az alapja. Hiába fűtenek, hiába tudnának fához hozzá jutni, az olyan, mintha kifelé fűtenék a levegőt, a lakást, nem maradna. És ezeknek a családoknak ezeket a pályázatokat kéne elsősorban felhasználni, és mi azért javasoljuk ezt, hogy a napenergia és a termálvíz felhasználására irányuló projektek mellett a pályázatok legyenek célzottan, összpontosítsanak a szegényebb családok alapvető feltételeinek a javítására. Ezt így érhetjük el, hogy ezek az emberek, ezek a közösségek kilábaljanak az energiaszegénységből, és miközben a hosszú távú fenntarthatóságnak az egyik megoldását alkalmazzák.
So our thanks there to Anna, and who introduced us to Aranka Rostas, who was speaking in the video there, and really showing that, you know, firewood isn't a cheap and cozy option in this instance, and that basic housing quality really needs to be addressed. And I think Aranka really said it perfectly, as poor people should have access to these solutions too. So you can actually support her efforts to bring renewables to her community by making a donation to the Lightbringers Foundation. I think, is the system working? The system is working. There's a QR code that you can get the details from there and make a donation to the Lightbringers Foundation. So next we have the lovely Adam Harmat, who's travelled for this meeting, regional lead of the Climate and Energy Programme of WWF Central and Eastern Europe. So Adam, you're working on the ground in Hungary with households in energy poverty, communities like Aranka's. What are the most practical, immediate interventions?
Thanks, Claire, and welcome everyone. I guess the easiest would be if we could clone Aranka. I mean, we really need forerunners like her, many. So the main issue is that when it comes to the heating issue, so I'm not talking about the solar and the electricity for lighting. So these typical buildings that are affected by energy poverty and using firewood, I also bring some pictures just for illustration. So they are consuming 4 to 5 times more energy per square meter than the minimum current standard. And so if we look at a typical house, so no insulation, original doors and windows, the cheapest metal stoves. And if you would like to burn the wood in an efficient way, I think the most important that we need to understand that firewood is really like a powerful fuel, so it's very energy intensive. And so if you burn it in an efficient way, then what's happened if you don't have the insulation and you don't have the heat storage, the temperature goes up, but then the building will cool down very quickly. So what can you do in order to steady the temperature? Is to make the burning incomplete, meaning that you close the air supplier and or you're using wet wood. And it means from environment and air pollution perspective a tragedy. So it really decreases the energy efficiency of the burning and also increases 3 to 4 times more the air pollution. So what we tried to do in partnership with the Habitat for Humanity is to pilot some demonstrative solutions that can be an immediate reaction to solve this very complex issue. So I just bring you some example. If we can go back one. Sorry, then, sorry, yes, then go on. So there is one about attic insulation. I think it's four, yes. Yes, that's one. So, this is like really easy to implement, so you don't really need expertise. The investment cost, it's really just the material, and you can really involve the community for the actual work. Then if you go to the previous slides, this is my personal interest or expertise. It's about replacing doors and windows, but with second-hand ones. So what we can see is that in the wealthier regions, double-glazed windows, they are already replaced by triple-glazed windows. But these double-glazed windows, they still have a much more better quality than the original one. So we bring this to the poor community, and also so we made the community involvement as well. So they were trained to do the replacement as their own. And I think there is also one slide about some cost-effective heat stove with heat storage. So this is, as I said, one of the big issue that they don't have the solutions to store the heat. And the last slide, so which is also like a big issue, is the wood moisture content. So the wood moisture content, it don't have any kind of regulation. So especially so now we are in end of February. Now we have the coldest nights in the whole heating season. So if you would like to buy firewood, you cannot buy dry wood because it's all sold out. And also, if you're an energy poor household, you need to spend, let's say, 1 or 2 of your monthly income to something that you will only spend or only use 2 years later. So this is not obviously realistic ask for energy poor households to think in advance of 2 years and buy wood and store it to let it dry. So in this kind of solutions, we created a community-based energy storage facility and also like a revolving fund of firewood. So the community are using the already dried wood, and then it will be replaced by the dry one that can be then dried for 2 years. And obviously, so these are like an immediate reactions, but I think it's important to highlight that obviously they cannot really replace the long-term structural solutions that we needed, deep energy renovations, and also social renting housing programs.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Adam. I mean, these are really very practical interventions that you're talking about, and insulation and new to second-hand doors, windows, this kind of stuff. But we're here talking in Brussels. How do you see the impact of EU policy on these communities?
Okay, I think so if we go to the deep end, so the root problem of all the issue is that biomass is accounted as renewable energy. I also have a last picture. So this is one biomass power plant in Hungary. It used to be a coal-fired power plant. Altogether, there are 4 others. So far, they received around almost €1 billion state subsidy because they are producing green electricity. And obviously, so one issue is that they consume a lot of primary woody biomass, so around 1/3 of the total firewood which is available. In Hungary, it's consumed by these large power plants. Obviously, it distorts the firewood markets and make the firewood expensive for the traditional households. So in the last 10 years, so if I compare the price of 2015, it's 3 times more today. And they are less efficient than burning wood on a household level. So it's a really crazy story, I would say. The second example, I think, which is a systematic problem, that on household level, the gross firewood use is accounted as renewable. So it doesn't matter if the efficiency is only 30 or 40%, because it's renewable. For the renewable energy target, the intensive is to keep this situation up, which is also very crazy. So what I hope is that the social climate plan, they can also support biomass user households, but as we discussed, so the social climate, so the whole aim is to support the fossil fuel user households. So it's not granted that biomass user households will be eligible, if they will, then will it be like a meaningful support for them?
Thank you so much, Adam, indeed, for highlighting the special perversities associated with how wood burning is classified currently, and also for saying the magic word social climate fund as we move to hear from a man I love to listen to for his expertise, Richard Lowe's heating policy expert with the Regulatory Assistance Project, who are, of course, a coalition member. Richard, we've just been discussing the really acute situations of a lot of households in Europe, and a big question: what could be an effective policy or program delivery for making clean heat more accessible and affordable for households?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Where to begin? I really like Anna's point about planning. I think there's still an information gap in lots of places, and people don't know. Local people, governments, all sorts of stakeholders don't know what to do. That's the problem. And so we've got the new rules on heat planning coming in for places up to 45,000 residents. I think if that was widespread, if it covered the whole of the EU, then that would be a really good starting place, because you'd have to just at least think about the issues, and that would be a very strong base to start from. But we don't have that yet, and you do end up where you've got smaller places. It could be very small communities or even small towns not covered by heat planning requirements, just with no real appreciation of the challenge that's got to come. So I think that would be the first step, I would say.
Okay. And do you see the local heating and cooling plans as the most important policy driver?
No. They are part of a package. Very good question. So the heating and cooling plans, part of a package. You cannot just plan. You've got to then build those plans. I've got some slides, but I'm not sure they're quite lined up with the questions. But if you go 2 slides ahead, I think that would help. Perfect. So this is from one of our big outputs, a heat pump policy toolkit, which we produce with partners Gora and Clasp and GBPN. And we know from our research that to produce and deliver heat pumps at scale, you've got to do lots of things at once. One of them is coordination, which is the base of that slide, and communication, which includes planning. But then on top of that, you've got to do pricing, sorting out pricing, and we've sort of touched on ETS coming in, but making other things, making clean heating relatively less expensive is absolutely key. That's one of them. There's also then a role for regulation, but the important one, probably from an access perspective, is just subsidy. So subsidising households to switch to clean heating is super important. It's difficult enough for people to get a new gas boiler sometimes if that's what they've got, but to make the switch to a heat pump from nothing can be thousands and thousands of euros. But if we go back one, there is a key technology which we haven't really talked about, which is air-to-air heat pumps. And we have focused in Europe on air-to-water heat pumps, which are expensive up front, quite complicated to fit, but they are efficient. But air-to-air heat pumps actually in southern Europe, the market's growing very strongly because they also provide cooling, but they are much more simple to fit and much cheaper than air-to-water heat pumps. And they provide cooling, which can be a really good draw for people. And they are so versatile you can fit them onto a tent. And my personal anecdote is that at COP in Baku, the tent was heated by air-to-air heat pumps. So they are versatile, they can be moved around, they can be plugged in. Particularly well suited to small dwellings and small buildings, but they can be scaled up. But it's quite easy actually to fit one to a relatively small house and it to do all of the work. But they don't provide hot water. So I think there's an important consideration there around air-to-air heat pumps.
Okay. I'm just going to ask, is Emanuela from Carbon Pulse, are you in the room? Is she in the... Oh, she's online. Okay. Because I'm going to put, I don't know who from the panel would like to answer this, but seeing as Richard, you said no, not Richard, Adam said the magic word social climate fund first. Let's talk about ETS2. This is coming down the track. How is this going to help decarbonisation? Like, what are ways that vulnerable households can be protected? And the question, I'll read it here from Emanuela, will it hit on homeowners or tenants through bills? Richard, do you want to take it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's the point of it.
Yes, that's the point.
It's designed to create a cost differential, a bigger cost differential between fossil fuels and clean heating or clean transport technologies. The whole point is that it is a charge on carbon. So naturally, it will put prices up. The plan is for it to be capped at such a low level that it might not have any impact, which is a problem with the scheme. That we might be entering a stage where it's coming in, but it won't do much, apart from move a small amount of money around. Pricing is absolutely vital to this whole debate. And we talked about biomass heating in particular. It's not actually that cheap normally. If you can get your own wood and collect it, it can be quite cheap. But buying wood from the market is expensive, and in countries I've worked in, it's typically more expensive than electric heating, and people often don't realise that. And so the market signals aren't there. Biomass is a tricky one because I don't think it's going to be covered by ETS2. I think it's excluded, and so the people using wood won't see an impact from ETS2 in terms of their heating fuel costs. The impacts are going to be on people that are using gas and oil, but the impacts might be quite marginal.
Anna, do you want to comment on that? Do you think firewood users are going to be affected by ETS2?
Indeed, I think unfortunately they will, because we've seen already that any price increase in gas is increasing the demand of biomass because of fuel switching activities, especially of people that already have both types of heating in their homes. And therefore it can, and also we witnessed this in Hungary in 2009 when there was an energy price crisis, and then later on around 2021 or 2 when we had the second price crisis. So indirectly it will increase firewood prices as well, which can be a signal to really transition for the lower middle and middle classes to better technologies, but we really should protect the most vulnerable ones who only rely on firewood because they don't have access to other technologies. They are not connected to gas nor district heating, and they have just a single heater in their homes. So we should, and not only for the sake of these households, but also for public health, because the more expensive firewood will get, the more alternatives will be burnt in these stoves, which we've heard how horrible it is to air pollution. So yes, I think the social remit fund should also consider these unintended externalities of the ETS2. But as it is very little, the main aim is to reuse the revenues from ETS2 not only to a climate, but like certainly 100% for climate perspectives, but within that also in a socially targeted way to facilitate the transition in areas where otherwise nothing would happen and it would stay the status quo.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the targeted support is really important. Do we have any questions from anyone in the room? Anyone here like to say anything? You're all very quiet. It's unusual. Okay. So we were talking about the Social Climate Fund, and indeed in member states, presumably there will be some busy civil servants making national social climate plans currently. So what could these look like? What kind of specific supports could lower income households get? Do they get 100% financing? Is it upfront? How is it delivered? What could programs on the ground look like?
I think no one knows. So we are witnessing the process in Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary. So the ministries, they just started to, except Romania. So we have the countries where they are under the technical assistance program. But yeah, it's even though so the deadline it's end of May. I think so. The process is not really well ahead, I would say. And I think what is really important that so the direct income support it should be minimized. It's I think it's 39% according to the regulation, but obviously it also has to be really addressed. So, for instance, in terms of distorting the firewood price, and so our recommendation is that it should be like a sort of mixture of policies and measures which are addressing some short-term issues, but also, as I highlighted, the deep energy renovation. It should be like really the cornerstone of the policies and measures.
I'd just build on that and say that this is, targeting capital investments rather than bill support is going to have much longer-term impacts. And it's a difficult thing to say that because bills are what people often care about the most. But if these funds can be targeted to things that last in perpetuity, they'll have a much bigger impact. For the most vulnerable households, there's clearly a case for capital funding for insulation, windows, doors, and heating systems. And often it's appropriate that they're fully funded because households just don't have the ability to pay anything additionally on top sometimes, which leads to a significant government investment problem. But I'm afraid that is inevitable. There is significant capital investment needed.
Yeah, there certainly is, and I hope we are able to build the evidence base, continue to build the evidence case for what this public investment can bring. I think this brings us to the end of this panel, sadly, because I have really learned a lot from these people and in the preparation of this, and there is so much work to be done ahead as in the preparation of the national social climate plans, keeping the civil society oversight on them. And it is a really new adventure, the Social Climate Fund being the first EU fund ever to specifically target low-income households affected by carbon pricing. So in a way, this is a big experiment and it's all to play for here. So a lot of work to be done to ensure no one is left out in the cold. And on that note, I'd like you to join me in thanking our excellent panelists. So, folks, like I said, we've got so much work ahead of us to clean up heating, and there are quite a few existing and upcoming policy and finance levers that can help us in this work. So I'm just going to speak a few words to that. Strong implementation of what has already been achieved. No rolling back on the progress made under the EU Green Deal. And it's time to stop wasting money on misguided subsidies for new fossil fuel heating. It's not only a dumb idea, but in fact, it should be the law by now in all member states. EPBD Article 17 on the phasing out of financing for fossil fuel boilers should have been transposed on the 1st of January of this year. So this is just one example of where we really need strong oversight from civil society to make sure that this stuff is happening and, you know, prevent what Stefan showed us, that fossil fuel boilers are still dominant, and this is kind of a disastrous lock-in for the next 15 to 20 years. So really important, start getting the price signals right for clean heating, and rebalancing the electricity gas prices is a must. ETS2, as we said, is a big deal. And the Cool Heating Coalition, we really acknowledge that there has been a lot of progress in the EU legislative framework. There's a lot of mentions for heating and cooling. But now it's time to bring this together. There's provisions scattered across the EPBD, the Renewables Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, and we need an EU heating and cooling action plan. The last one was in 2016, and by God, has the world changed since then. And an action plan which addresses the time horizons that Ava was talking about, getting to 2030, then to 2040. Really, it's around the corner. So we want to see a plan that promotes clean, affordable, renewable solutions and prioritizing our own clean heat industries. This is geothermal, solar thermal, heat pumps, district heating. And to do this, we need to develop roadmaps for scaling renewable heat supply chains. So I really hope that we're going to see a big push on district heating. Let's hope the Danish presidency will help us advance this agenda. And also empowering people on the ground in their homes through energy communities and cooperatives. So supporting the transition and making it accessible. As we've heard here today, it's time for targeted support, not a few, you know, sops to the more well-off, and here you can put a few solar panels on. We're talking about a more profound societal choice than that, really. And we can redirect money that would have been spent on fossil fuel heating subsidies to finance this transition. Cooling is, we're in a warming world. Climate change is here and now. So we're decarbonising heating and cooling in the coalition, and cooling is going to become an increasingly bigger part of our work. And strengthening the local authorities that can deliver on the heating and cooling plans, you know, the municipal plans, and support them, technical guidelines, funding, and helping to monitor the progress. I don't know if Melanie from European Heat Pump Association is still in the room, but we're looking forward to seeing you decarbonising industrial heat pumps, heating and cooling, and electrification for over 60% of industrial heat needs. We're expecting to see a push from the Heat Pump Association, and especially hoping for good outcomes from the Heat Pump Accelerator platform. And, you know, money talks, nothing, and none of this is going to happen for free. And what comes out of the upcoming debate on the MFF and how we spend it, it's really vital. So the coalition is working hard on this already. We want to see place-based funding, because that's where the energy transition and the heating and cooling transition happens. It happens on the ground. It happens at the local level, in my home and your home, the street, district and community level, and city by city. And especially for the cities, direct access to cities for funds and improving the absorption rate for funds is so important. No finance for fossil fuels. I cannot say it often enough, I think. But really ensure that the MFF does not fund fossil fuel projects. Like, it's not what we should be doing. Participation, keeping citizens, civil society, organizations, NGOs engaged and active and heard in the MFF process, and to maintain those all-important social and environmental conditionalities. We want a single funding stream for heating and cooling, single, earmarked, ring-fenced, dedicated, call it what you like, but easy to access funding for this. And finally, the last word to keep folks like me in a job, visibility and communication, very important to make sure that EU funding and the good that it does do is highly visible to citizens and directly benefiting them, keeping them warm. And we all know we are living through some really difficult and really frightening times. And this is as good a time as any to really stand up for European values, European industries, and fly the flag. Let's fly the EU flag and accelerate the transition, a just transition to clean heat. So thank you for being here today and for being a part of it. Over to you, Kira.
Thank you. So for our closing words, I'd like to invite our MEP host up to take the chair if we can swap around just so there's enough space for everyone. Thank you. So just to conclude from my side, just to summarise what we've heard already. So we know that this is a complex challenge, that this covers health, environment, climate and issues of social justice. And that requires a complex answer. We've heard that some of that lies in our buildings, in renovation, in making that accessible, in rolling out renewables and insulation and even second-hand doors. And this also we also need to use our buildings wisely, once they're renovated and before they are renovated. On the other side, we also need the policy to support this, to support the rollout of heat pumps and other clean heat. And also maybe look at where other countries have got it right. Is the UK's clean heat market mechanism something that could be replicated in the European Union? We also need to support those clean tech industries and make sure that there are the right skills to be able to roll this out. There also needs to be the awareness, the skills. Do people even know how hot their room is, how hot their office is, and do they know how to control that temperature? And finally, and most importantly, the key word that we've heard today is access. This needs to be affordable. This needs to be something which people can feel involved in and can help a just transition. So with that, I would like to hand over to our co-host, Sigrid Fries, to give our final words.
Thank you so much for initiating this event, and also to everyone participating in it and to everyone who's contributed to making this conversation interesting, because I think this is a topic that we need to debate even more, and where we should gather the forces in driving this transition. Because some of the things that were decided in the last mandate and were debated up here today, the importance of the European Buildings Directive or the Energy Efficiency Directive, is things that sadly we cannot take it for granted that they will be followed through, that they will be implemented, and that there will be the political will to actually follow up on the measures, on the agreements that were made in the last term. That's something that was quite surprising for me to learn as an MEP serving my first mandate here. I thought we came to build upon the work that had already been done. It turns out you have to spend a lot of your time and your energy to fight, not to have any backtracing, not to have any letting go of the goals and the ambitions that has already been agreed on. Therefore, it means a lot to be gathered with great perspectives from people sharing the views, and where we can hopefully also find and build bridges and alliances across to ensure that we actually achieve the goals that are set out, achieve the goal of decarbonizing the heating and cooling sector, to reduce the heat demand by energy efficiency, to ensure the access to clean heat for everyone, depending whether you are industry or you are a consumer, whether you're high, medium or low income, that you have access to clean heating. And I think the debates up here today also reflected that that status quo should not be an option, that the cost of inaction is way higher than the investment that we might be looking into, that it has some significant impact on both the environment and biodiversity if we continue business as usual. It has influence on the public health and the quality of the air that we breathe if we continue business as usual. And it, of course, has impact on the rising temperatures, the climate that is right now suffering from the emissions also caused by the energy sector. So I think there's a lot of work ahead of us, and therefore it means a lot to gather the forces and to build some bridges. And I just want to applaud what has been set up here, both some of the great example that has been given, whether it's from the UK and the market mechanism, or if it's from thinking in a more circular way in terms of replacing windows more efficiently, reusing them. And the fact is that nothing is going to happen for free, and nothing is going to happen if we don't push for it politically and with the actors involved in the sector. So thank you very much for being here, participating today. I hope the participation, the involvement doesn't end today, but it's just one step on the way. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you to our co-host MEPs for supporting this event. Thank you to all of our panellists across the various panels that we've had. Thank you to our audience for joining us and everyone who worked on this behind the scenes. There may still be some refreshments in the corner, so head over there and we can continue the conversation. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.